Good morning. This is the morning brief for July 12th. 8 developments lead today. A new independent review in the Nolan Wells case, the end of the remaining Proud Boys prosecution, deadly Missouri flooding, an Apalachee court hearing, Kennedy Center contracting allegations, new United States strikes on Iran, Russian attacks across Ukraine, and the death of a Gaza aid organizer. The family of Nolan Xavier Wells has begun an independent investigation and autopsy after the 18-year-old was found dead on Horn Island, Mississippi, following a 4th of July boat trip. Evidence: Reuters, PBS, CNN, and The Washington Post report that Wells disappeared after reaching the barrier island with friends and that his body was later recovered there. Background: Wells was a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, and his parents say the account that he chose to remain behind does not fit his character. The family retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump and moved Wells's body to Washington for a separate examination. Mississippi authorities have treated drowning as the presumed cause, but the outside review is intended to test that conclusion and establish a more complete chronology. The consequence is a widening accountability question over what happened on the island, what search authorities documented, and whether every witness account aligns with physical evidence. This is a material update from the earlier report that he had been found. The new development is the family-led examination and investigation. A credible resolution will require medical findings, contemporaneous communications, search records, and witness interviews to point toward the same sequence of events. Watch next: the independent autopsy findings, any official coroner revision, and a dated law enforcement timeline for the 4th of July trip. U.S. District Judge Timothy Kelly approved the Justice Department's request to dismiss the remaining convictions of 4 Proud Boys members from the January 6 Capitol attack. Evidence: the Associated Press, The Washington Post, CBS News, and PBS identify the men as Ethan Nordian, Joseph Biggs, Zachary Rehel, and Dominic Pezzola. Background: President Trump granted sweeping clemency in January 6 cases, and former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio's conviction had already been vacated separately. Kelly, a Trump appointee, wrote that there was little mystery about why the administration abandoned the prosecution and repeated that the Capitol attack was a perilous event. He nevertheless concluded that the Constitution and the government's motion left him no lawful basis to preserve the convictions. The consequence is that a landmark seditious conspiracy prosecution now closes without a finding that the trial evidence was false or that the original jury process was defective. The order instead shows how presidential clemency and executive control of federal prosecution can change the practical result after convictions and appeals. Dismissal ends the remaining criminal case, but it does not erase the public record of January 6 or Kelly's criticism of the pardon rationale. Watch next: the final docket entries, any effort to challenge collateral consequences, and whether Congress or future courts address the reach of clemency after completed federal trials. Flash flooding across Missouri killed 1 person and forced hundreds of rescues, including an airlift of more than 200 children and counselors from Camp Taumsauk. Evidence: the Associated Press, NPR, PBS, and Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe's emergency declaration say 6 to 12 inches of rain fell in areas as roads, homes, and campgrounds flooded. Background: Kehoe declared a state of emergency on Friday, activating state agencies and the Missouri National Guard, while local teams conducted swiftwater operations in Iron and Reynolds counties. 2 rescue boats capsized during the response in Reynolds County, but other emergency crews recovered those responders safely. The camp evacuation became the largest operation, yet it was part of the same storm system as the wider rescue totals and state emergency. A second package entry describing those facts was removed as a duplicate. The consequence is an ongoing life safety threat even after the heaviest band moves away, because saturated ground and damaged roads can turn another thunderstorm into renewed flash flooding. Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and nearby areas also faced watches, road closures, or instructions to be ready for higher ground. Officials still need to reconcile changing rescue counts and complete damage assessments across multiple counties. Watch next: National Weather Service warnings, Missouri Emergency Management Agency casualty and rescue totals, road reopening notices, and verified local evacuation guidance. A Georgia judge has scheduled a non-negotiated plea and sentencing hearing for Colt Gray, the teenager accused in the September 2024 Apalachee High School shooting. Evidence: the Associated Press, CBS News, CNN, and Atlanta Journal-Constitution report that the hearing is set for July 24 in Barrow County Superior Court. Background: Gray, 16, previously pleaded not guilty to murder charges after 2 students and 2 teachers were killed and 9 other people were injured. Court records use the phrase non-negotiated plea, indicating that the filed hearing is not announcing a plea agreement with prosecutors. The consequence is that the case may move from trial preparation to a formal plea and sentencing record, but the court must first take the plea in open session and determine the legal disposition. Until that occurs, reporting should describe the change as expected rather than final. The hearing also matters to victims' families because it can replace a lengthy trial with a direct statement of responsibility and an immediate sentencing phase. Gray was charged as an adult, while his age remains relevant to the available punishment and future review. Separate proceedings involving his father are not the subject of this hearing and should not be conflated with the teenager's docket. Watch next, the plea entered on July 24, the judge's sentencing findings, victim impact statements, and any post-sentencing appeal notice. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse says whistleblowers described rushed or improper renovation work at the Kennedy Center after President Trump took control of the institution. Evidence. The Associated Press, PBS, The Guardian, and White House's Senate committee release traced the disclosure to the Government Accountability Project, a nonprofit representing whistleblowers. Background: the allegations say federal contracting requirements were ignored while work was accelerated for televised December events, including the World Cup draw and a FIFA Peace Prize presentation to Trump. The disclosure cites a reflecting pool renovation that is allegedly rusting and peeling, along with column painting that may require repairs. These are allegations presented by a senator, not completed findings by an inspector general, court, or audit agency. The consequence is a federal spending and safety dispute at a congressionally supported National Arts Center, with potential costs if deficient work must be rebuilt. It also extends the political conflict over the center beyond programming and naming decisions into procurement, construction quality, and stewardship of public money. White House has asked for records and expanded an existing inquiry into Kennedy Center spending. A meaningful answer requires contracts, change orders, inspection reports, invoices, and the center's response to each claimed defect. Watch next. The Kennedy Center's formal reply, release of procurement and inspection records, and any independent review by federal auditors or congressional investigators. The United States launched new strikes on Iran after an Iranian attack set a container ship ablaze in the Strait of Hormuz and left one crew member missing. Evidence. The Associated Press, Reuters, NPR, and Central Command identify the vessel as the Cyprus-flagged GFS Galaxy and describe the American operation as retaliation for the latest attack on commercial shipping. Background: Iranian state media reported American strikes in southern Iran and near Tehran, while missile alerts sounded across several Gulf Arab countries. Iran also renewed attacks toward Gulf states and said the strait was closed, escalating a confrontation centered on one of the world's most important oil and shipping routes. The consequence is danger for mariners and a risk that repeated retaliation turns controlled strikes into a broader regional war. Even without a formal blockade, insurers, ship operators, and ports can restrict traffic when crews, hulls, and cargoes face attack. That disruption can tighten energy supply and raise transport costs far beyond the Gulf. Claims from the combatants require separate verification because early military accounts often differ on targets, interceptions, and damage. Diplomacy remains possible, but every new ship attack narrows the space for de-escalation. Watch next, Central Command's target list, the ship operator's crew and damage report, Gulf interception statements, port security notices, and any renewed U.S.-Iran diplomatic contact. Russian missile and drone attacks killed at least 6 people, including a child, and wounded 29 across Ukraine as Ukrainian forces struck Russian-linked shipping in the Sea of Azov. Evidence. The Associated Press, Reuters, NBC News, and France 24 report strikes in Kyiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, and other regions, with casualty figures changing as local authorities updated separate incidents. Background: President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia launched 12 missiles and 121 drones overnight, while emergency officials reported 11 wounded in Kyiv alone. A missile strike in Odessa killed 2 people, and a drone attack on a civilian enterprise in Kharkiv wounded 7 in an earlier regional tally. Those location-specific numbers explain why some reports carried a headline of 2 dead and 19 wounded while later national counts were higher. Ukraine, meanwhile, said it damaged more than 24 Russian tankers and other vessels, extending the conflict's pressure on logistics and energy assets. The consequence is simultaneous strain on civilian protection, air defense ammunition, and maritime escalation. Kyiv is asking partners to accelerate air defense deliveries after shortages left cities more exposed to ballistic missiles and drones. Casualty totals remain provisional until regional reports are consolidated. Watch next, Ukraine's Air Force interception assessment, emergency service casualty revisions, confirmed damage to the vessels, and dated announcements on additional air defense munitions. An Israeli strike in Gaza City killed Palestinian aid official Mohammed al-Wahidi shortly before an Egypt-Argentina World Cup screening that he helped organize. Evidence. The Associated Press, NPR News, CBS News, and Shifa Hospital director Mohammed Abu Selmiya report that the strike hit a car in the Sabra neighborhood and killed 4 people. Background: al-Wahidi worked with the Egyptian Relief Committee, which provides food, shelter, and other assistance, and had arranged public match screenings for displaced families across Gaza. The other people killed were driver Ahmed Dagmush and brothers Hamza al-Dari, age 10, and Fari al-Dari, age 8, according to hospital officials. The Israeli military said al-Wahidi was not the target, said it aimed at a Hamas militant and was checking whether Dagmush was that person. Those statements leave a disputed identification that must be resolved without presenting either side's first account as established fact. The consequence reaches beyond one screening. The strike killed an aid organizer and children during a ceasefire period in which local health officials report continuing civilian deaths. The screenings had offered a rare communal break amid displacement and destruction, so his death also disrupted a civilian relief and morale effort. Watch next: the military's promised review, independent confirmation of the intended target, the Egyptian committee's response, and whether the Gaza screenings and aid work continue. That is the morning brief. The next decisive records are the autopsy findings, court dockets, emergency bulletins, contract files, military damage reports, and official reviews named in each story.